Welcome to another episode of Heartlands Media. My name is Kit Capella. I'm joined here today with Paul DuPont, Daniel Lupker. We have a great episode with you guys. We got 2 live stream stories we want to share with you, as well as that we have our special guest, Beatriz Sandoval, who will be joining us a little bit later in the second hour. So with that being said, let's talk about the live stream event that we held in Wisconsin, the protest against Foxconn. So essentially, we were invited by this event to this event by the Gaia Coalition, as well as a few other member groups that were part of this protest. And essentially, here's the deal with Foxconn. Foxconn is a foreign company that's headquartered in Taiwan. They have a lot of their industrial facilities on the mainland of China, and what they produce is our Blackberries, iPhones, smartphones, PlayStations, Xbox One, and other smart technology that we use on a daily basis. The current situation, though, with Foxconn is that when they were trying to find a location to where they could build a new factory, there were a few states that were in the bid to try and get this facility in their state. And, of course, it's similar to like how the Amazon deal is. There were so many states that were bending over backwards just to have, the Foxconn company in their state. So here's the deal that Foxconn got from Wisconsin, because Wisconsin was the state that won it. Essentially, they were originally going to offer $3 billion worth of state incentives, as well as at the same time to offer some job opportunities. At least for the most part, it did start off at $5,000. However, one of the concerns that the people had in regards to this company coming here is that, well, they were starting to ask for more, and plus they weren't following any guidelines in regards to environmental protections, especially towards the clean drinking water.
In fact, they were exempted from them.
Yes, exactly. And so as time went on, the $3 billion eventually rose up to $4.5 billion. And you can actually learn more about it from a video compilation that we have on our YouTube channel. So just check that out when you have the chance.
I think we can actually play a little snippet of that.
Let's put it, just a little bit here.
So let's hear it.
Coming up.
Lake Michigan, they're talking about extracting 7 million gallons a day. 2.5 million of which would evaporate.
I'm talking about Wisconsin family farms, and they are struggling. They're struggling to pay their bills, they're struggling to eat, they're struggling to keep their farms, to keep their land. The very same thing we're hearing from people in Mount Pleasant. Their land was given away to a foreign corporation in the name of economic interests. And my thing is, in whose economic interest? For the economic interest of Wisconsin when we look at the long-term outcomes, or the economic interest of a private company who's taking public resources for free?
The people of Wisconsin are going to get is a huge bill. They have a $4 billion investment. This is a huge corporate giveaway. But really what they're going to get is an obligation to support this company. This is corporate welfare.
The job.
Yeah. So as you all can hear, there's definitely a lot of people that are really concerned, upset, and angry at the fact that this company is being built in Wisconsin. It's not following any environmental procedures, and plus there's concern about the jobs. Now, essentially, Foxconn was offering like around 5,000. Then the job number rose up to 13,000. However, the situation with these jobs is that the thing is that people are saying that they're only temporary jobs, and that means when the construction of the facility is done, most of those jobs are going to disappear, and the jobs that are going to remain are going to be white-collar jobs, and they could be, 40 at max, 10 at the bare minimum.
Well, well, that's more for a pipeline. This is still a factory.
Yeah.
But it is similar to how a pipeline functions in that most of the jobs are in construction, then a residual amount by comparison are actually in running the place. The facility is going to be highly automated, and again, it's exempt from all these different environmental laws. And we actually spoke to one of the governor candidates who said that he would shut it down and shut the entire contract down because it's very easy to argue that that's an entirely illegal thing to exempt one company from the laws of the land, and then it's, as he put it, it would be an illegal contract. So they're going to have a few thousand jobs that are going to be there. People that are running the factory, we've been heard some people say that there's even some rumors that they'll just bring in Chinese migrants from China to run the facility. So it'll be a...
Certainly that's got to be somewhat more difficult. Certainly, you'd have to not only fly people here, but try and find ways of getting visas. for all of them.
Well, the thing is, as you know, we've seen people are having trouble with visas unless they're connected to Trump. And Trump was at this site. He was at the groundbreaking. He was digging the groundbreaking hole with a couple other people. So doesn't seem unplausible that they would bring in. And they're actually, I think they're even building shelters for that's why people think that that's what they're going to do.
Yeah, but there's one other thing, too, that people are bringing up, and that is water sanitation and, of course, also how the water is going to be treated. Now, essentially, around 7 million gallons of water is going to be, siphoned into the facility. But one of the concerns that a lot of the environmentalists and activists were stating was that the water is just going to be dumped right back into Lake Michigan. And we talked about something similar to this, like in East Chicago, Indiana, and other steel factories that are in the state of Indiana, whereas they dump regulated, quote-unquote, regulated toxic waste into Lake Michigan. So not only do we have to worry about Lake Michigan being contaminated from the state of Indiana, but we also have to worry about contamination from Wisconsin as well. And also, there's a very good chance that many of the wetlands will be destroyed. Many of the
they're going to get filled in.
Yeah, many of the underground water reservoirs are going to be poisoned. And so then the communities of Mount Pleasant and Racine are going to have contaminated water, very similar to what's happening in Flint, Michigan, or East Chicago, Indiana, or in a similar case, Chicago, as we have lead in our city's water as well. So there's two different aspects to look at this. The building of the Foxconn facility is one. If the project flops, the state of Wisconsin is going to be held with 40% of the state bonds. So that means if the project flops, the state of Wisconsin could be hurt budgetarily for the next, 60 plus years. And then there's also the environmental aspect, and that
the environmental aspect will last forever.
Yeah.
But the big issue is that even if everything goes correct and everything's smooth and everything works, the best case scenario is in 40 years the state will make its money back, which seems like a really terrible time to get a return on investment. 2 generations. Like when we were discussing a while back, the people who think there's with the controversy with Elon Musk doing his tunnel, even if it's $1 billion, we're talking about some numbers. Even in a worst case scenario, it would pay for itself in half the time, and that's such an experimental project. Yeah. I mean, we're talking, and people were saying that, hey, instead of getting these. And even the jobs, the number they say, we'll have 13,000 jobs. It seemed more like everyone kept saying it was like a marketing term, because it was originally, we'll have 3,000 jobs. Oh, that doesn't seem high enough. 5,000. Oh, no, 7. No, 13.
Then it got to 13,000. But it's very important to know.
But it's also that means Wisconsin, the state that hates paying money because they don't like welfare queens, is paying a foreign company about $370,000 per worker that they're going to continue to automate out of production for a facility that they're not even sure is going to last.
Yeah, and the thing is, look, the supporters of the construction of Foxconn, look, I could see why there were some people on, like, at least why the Wisconsin state legislator and even the governor was on board for this construction. As number one, hey, this is more money for them, plus they get to collect more lobbyist money, because that's the system we live in. Money corrupts. And we live in a system where money is speech and corporations are people. But, when we look at the Midwest, it used to be a huge industrial area. There used to be jobs here in mass. And I guess, for the most part, a lot of working class families, they want to work. But the problem with the Foxconn facility is that it's not going to do what they want. And, in fact, it's going to hurt them in the long run. Many of the jobs are going to be automated, and the people going to be running the automation and AI aren't going to be blue-collar citizens. It's going to be white-collar citizens. And for the most part, when we were interviewing some people, some of the activists at this event, they were saying that most of those white-collar jobs are going to be from people driving in from Illinois or Chicago. And so,
and on top of that, the mass of the workers that will be there will be paid, $13 or $14 an hour. So this is a situation where Wisconsin loves welfare queens, just the ones that pay them.
That's the most important point that you're making right there. These are the same folks that are super against any government handouts, and we hate, people who are those pernicious folks.
Hold on,
at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder.
Let's make one correction though. The thing is, it's a state government, it's a state legislator, and the governor of Wisconsin. The people of Wisconsin are one, they don't want to get their water contaminated, and two, yes, they all want to work, but they're being screwed over by their state legislator. And for the most part, we got to remember that Scott Walker, their governor, is definitely in league with the Koch brothers, who we all know they love the current system of money and politics.
Right.
And,
before this, he's most well known for stripping union rights from teachers and firefighters.
Yeah.
Come on, this is super red Republican Wisconsin, which will always tell you that you can't have any handouts. You can't make sure that you have a guaranteed minimum standard of living for people. But by the way, we've got $4 billion to give a Chinese company to set up shop here that isn't going to make anybody any more money, anybody's lives better. It's just a giveaway.
And in fact, one thing that the Republicans are also heavily against is eminent domain. And farms from people that have been living there for centuries have been just like, no, those are the states now. Those belong to us.
Yeah,
these are people that, and the big thing is that it's not even that they're like, we are going to build this facility in this spot, and then we're going to have this facility here, so we need this land. It's more of a, we think we might need that land maybe in 10 years' time, so we'll just take it now.
Just like DAPL, this is a major misappropriation of eminent domain, right?
Yeah.
Eminent domain has begun to be used for governments to give private land to private companies for private profit. It's supposed to be when a government needs to take private property for public use.
Yeah.
Right? This is not a public highway. This is not a public park. This is not a national forest preserve. This is a private business.
Yeah, and on top of that, we're looking at the farmers that are losing their land. That's their livelihood. Basically, you have the state government coming in and taking away something that they've known for generations, land they worked on for so many years. And now, what do you expect them to do? Just start over again? Maintaining a farm costs a lot of money. And then also there's the homeowners, there's the renters who live there. They're losing their homes, they're losing their livelihood. And the state of Wisconsin, its legislators, turning a blind eye to this. Now, of course, there's going to be a midterm election cycle, a primary that's going to be happening in Wisconsin. And to the people of Wisconsin, they have a chance, an opportunity to turn things around for them for the better. And hopefully word gets out about Foxconn and the danger that it poses towards our clean drinking water as well as to the state's economy. Because if Foxconn fails, like I said before, if the project flops, if it goes under, the state of Wisconsin, the tax-paying citizens of Wisconsin are going to be stuck with 40% of the damages.
So, again, this comes back to the same point that when you don't have money and you don't have power, you have to eat up all the costs that the system throws at you, and how dare you insinuate the idea that you should get a little help when it's needed. But if you're a major corporation, either foreign or domestic, if you've given money to politicians, how dare you try and stop them from getting government handouts? It's a true sense of hypocrisy. It's never, again, there's no real ideology here. There's no, we're conservatives in government and we have these conservative values. It's consistently been, we are bought by people with money and we will do their bidding. These are not government officials in the real sense and the idea of the word. They are employees of several companies that are doing things using the power of government as leverage to do so.
Socialism for the rich and free market capitalism for everyone else.
That's a really big point. That on TV, you'll see Fox, especially from a story we're going to cover later in the second hour, that Fox has always been, how dare there be socialism? Socialism is an evil brought up by Satan, but it's fine if it's a large company. In that case, it's as American as apple pie. It's hypocrisy, but it's really not. It's a system of power with people in power, running with other people that work for those people in power, operating in a way that gives them more power. That's all it is. And as much as we're talking about Republicans here in Wisconsin, it's not that different. It's the same system with different players on the Democratic side. We're seeing a resurgence trying to undo that. Again, we're going to talk about that later. But this is expected. Giving $4.5 billion, again, it's what I've said before. America's like a drunk uncle. It's like a drunk father. There's always alcohol money. There's never lunch money. There's never college money. there's never money unless they want to do it. So.
Yeah, and I want to give a final note to this. At the protest, we counted around 300, maybe 400 protesters there. And second, to the people of Wisconsin, this is going to be a serious fight and a serious issue that you're going to have to stand up and keep organizing around, because the one concern that people had, even though right now the incentive stands at like around $4.5 billion for Foxconn, there was another concern, was that there's going to be other additional costs that's going to be added up. So the price for Foxconn will keep on going up and up. So
just like it already has been.
So if this is an issue that you're concerned about, angry about, now's the time to talk to your neighbors. Now's the time to call up your state legislators, especially for the people in Wisconsin. Now's the time to step up.
And there's a few people in Illinois.
Yeah.
What was it, Mount
Pleasant?
Mount Pleasant gave about $750 million too. This is also an Illinois issue. It also affect the Michigan water. So
this is a story that's going to affect us all, and we're going to follow through with this. We have some context on the ground there. We will follow through with this story and learn more about the Foxconn situation. So that being said, we're going to move on to another live stream event that we covered yesterday, and that was Abolish ICE and Family Deportations. And this was held by a lot of progressive groups here in the city of Chicago. It was in Pilsen. It was hosted by the Pilsen Alliance, Chicago Democratic Socialists of America, 12th Ward IPO, 25th Ward IPO.
Refuse Fascism was there too.
Refuse Fascism was there, and there were so many other organizations there as well. And everyone was standing in solidarity. There was like around 1,000, maybe 2,000 plus people there. Me and Daniel were there, and we eventually, like the park, it was empty, and then it started getting more people in there, and we've all seen the disturbing images of the children in cages, of mothers and fathers being separated from their children, of children crying, and of course there's also been some video evidence of ICE officials mocking and laughing at the children crying or the families being separated. And it's angering a lot of people, because this is something that we as Americans should be outraged at. And if we saw this being done in a third world country by a dictator, I can almost hear all the congressmen and senators.
Imagine if Syria did this.
Yeah. You could hear all the congressmen and senators saying,
"We must go to war with
we must
these
go
barbarians.
to war. Yeah, we got to stop them. We got to enforce human rights." But no, this is happening in our own country at our border, and it was a little difficult to hear a lot of the stories at the live stream, especially like some of the speakers, in regards to hearing how their family members were deported or arrested and put into jail. And the thing is, one of the students that was there, she really stood out. She was a Muslim student going into law school, and she told how her father was arrested under George Bush Jr.'s administration, and then how her brother basically had to leave the United States and move to Canada under Obama's administration. So ICE has been around for like 15 years. It's nothing that's really old. It's a brand new system. It's still in its infancy, and on top of that, it's basically something that only the president of the United States can use. So it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. ICE has been around under, I think, more than two presidential administrations. This was around before Trump came into office.
This was put in with the package, with the Patriot Act. But we really credit Obama with it, because Bush used it to an extent, but Obama made it what it is today. Before Obama, it was a really almost rinky-dink sort of organization that was about 3% as large as it is today. Obama really kicked it into overdrive, and now Trump is using that overdrive to really add a layer of cruelty. Every president has added its own layer of something to it. Again, Bush created, Obama brought into what it is now, Trump utilizing the way that he is. This is why we say that it's not just about Trump. This is a continual train of actions taken that Trump is simply able to utilize in a way that's especially cruel, but it's not new.
ICE as an organization is over-empowered. They are sort of acting as a police arm as well as a judicial arm. They're preventing people from having access to lawyers. They're basically an American version of the Gestapo. Like, it's hard to describe them as anything else. And it's funny when you have people, even finally we're starting to have senators come out and say, we should abolish ICE. We need to figure out a different way to do this. And it takes people by surprise. But we're starting to see a little bit of a shift to the left among some of our Democratic people. Kristen Gillibrand came out. She was a big corporate sort of establishment type. And I think she's sort of seeing the way the wind is blowing and has come out and said we need to abolish ICE and it needs to be reimagined as something else. And
here's the thing. There's another, I forget the organization's name, but there's another organization that used to do this that was actually, because ICE is, like you said, ICE is not a government agency, it's an arm of the presidency. It is a Gestapo, it is a police force that is a judge, jury, and an executioner. Mm-hmm. Whereas, there's so many three-letter organizations in the government, but there was a previous entity that used to do what ICE did, and it didn't do these things because it had to follow, there had to be a trial. When a trial happened, you had to get a lawyer appointed to you. Mm-hmm. There was due process. You'd figure out if they had a claim or not. Whereas ICE, it's very much meant to, how can we pretend that we're doing that while actually not doing that? How can we... And again, this is what we were saying, that you can build these things up, and we've been saying, well before we started doing this, that we were saying, Obama, stop doing these things, and we have so many people say, stop messing with Obama. He's doing what he can. He's doing the best he can. People, again, got to realize that Trump is simply using tools that have been always available. Yeah, this was always a risk that this was going to happen, and we've been yelling for years that this was a obvious possibility and would happen eventually.
Yeah, there's a couple things I want to add on to this too. This, as you mentioned, Daniel, this was the ICE was intensified. The program was given more resources under Obama's administration. Now, President Obama. He's a Harvard law professor. He's had some time in state government. You would think he would understand about human rights and human decency before he, became president of the United States. Before he decided to run, and then when he's in office, he gives this program that's very minimal. It doesn't do what it's doing now, and he gives it more teeth. He gives it more power, and he lays the groundwork for somebody like Trump to use to its full capacity. And it's downright insane that this happened under a quote-unquote Democratic president. You would think he would know better, but no. You see, when it comes down to this neoliberal corporate establishment system that we have, it doesn't matter who's in office. If they are, owned by Wall Street and the big banks and corporations, they're going to worry more about their donors and the financial benefits. And there's a lot of organizations and companies that are invested in ICE. Okay, ICE is around because it also has corporate connections too, and those same corporations donate to federal and state politicians and the president. Here's the thing. ICE has now put itself in a position to where they have some power, but with the images that have come out, especially under Trump's administration, people are starting to get angry and upset, and they're looking more into the history of ICE and how it got started. And now more than ever, especially at that protest, there were so many people in unison calling for its disbandment. And when you look at these images of kids crying and parents like helpless against the separation, I'm almost at a loss for words of just how inhumane it is.
Let me give a story on this to kind of fill this in. I was just listening to someone who had left one of the detention centers they were hired in. First of all, who do you think there is being hired? It's actually retail workers, because you get paid $2 more an hour, and construction workers, so people that don't have anything with, especially with kids. They have no experience dealing with kids. You're not, if a kid's crying, you're not allowed to hug them. That's against the rules. And also, they aren't allowed to hug each other. So when two kids, maybe they're brothers, are upset and they're hugging each other, well, that's a terrible infraction. How dare they do that? And the way that they were describing how they restrained kids is they would put their foot in their back, and you hold their arms out, and so you do like this. And of course, that's how you deal with children. Yeah, this is what
everyone knows that.
And so, in the end, all of these kids are going to be traumatized for their entire lives. This is something that will never be able to be undone. At the same time, it is greater than numbers as before, but this same thing has happened to so many other families. There have been mothers and kids that have been separated under Obama, under Bush. Again, the numbers were different, but the effect was the same. The difference is Trump puts an accurate face on the government. So now people care about what's happening. Whereas before, I would say most Americans really didn't care because they didn't know. And the reason they didn't know is they weren't looking into news, because what is news? If you want to go to TV and watch news, are you kidding me? That's not news. That's infotainment. MSN, CNN. They don't care about news. They care about ratings. News is, it's like the 24-hour. It's like, what is news? Oh, this person got shot today. This person got robbed today. Something topical, something you'll see. It's gossip. That's not news. People haven't cared about these issues because they haven't cared. They haven't had the time. They're working 3 jobs, and they didn't know.
Yeah.
So at least now the only possible hope that you can take out of this disgusting situation is the idea that there's potential for change.
Yeah, and the thing is, these protests, especially what happened in Pilsen, they're not going to go away. In fact, I want to give a special shout out. There is a protest that's happening downtown right now as we speak. I think it's near the Daly Center. I could be wrong, maybe near the Clark and Lake area as well, the Thompson Center. And, this is, again, it's a protest against ICE. It's a protest against stopping the separation of families. So it's not going to go away. This
ICE
program
is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, it is. And no pun intended, but the fact that this program is so barbaric, you're seeing so many people come out and say, this is how this program affected me. On our live stream yesterday, all the speakers that were talking, they were speaking about how this program has affected them and their family members. They're not alone. There's countless millions of people that have been affected by the policies of ICE. And again, this was done under Bush, Obama, and has continued under Trump. And so this conversation about abolishing ICE will not go away because people do not want to forget. Sorry, I didn't mean to stutter there, but they don't want to forget because it's so disgusting.
And in fact, it's also not new. Even though it seems new, you can really see, you can pick apart American history and see exactly pieces of this. Again, history never repeats, but it always rhymes. The cycle always continues anew in a new way that rhymes. In this case, we have Japanese internment camps where at least, George Takei put out a post a while back when this first happened. He said, at least when I was put in a Japanese internment camp and had everything I had stripped away from me, they didn't separate me from my parents, which says something. Then you can look at like the Chinese Exclusion Act, which you can look at the Muslim ban. Everything that we're dealing with now happened in some way, shape, or form in the 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
And it happened, interestingly enough, under similar economic situations where income inequality was vast and powerful, and the rich, the 1%, controlled everything and the poor had nothing. It was true destitution of poverty that isn't quite the same right now. We're a few levels of magnitude higher, even on the bottom end, than what it was in the 20s and 30s. But we're still dealing with the same. It's like when certain events happen, when income inequality happens, when scapegoating is needed in a system of government like ours, that has capitalism, it's very interesting how every time it happens, it plays out so similarly to how it plays out in the past. And so the only hope that I have from this is that back then, those issues, those disgusting acts, led to a more progressive country in the 60s. And that's the only real thing I can grab at to give any possibility of hope, because this is just terrible.
I'll add a final note to the story. Look, no matter what your political spectrum, and this is just to regular voters, whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, doesn't matter your skin color, religion, I know for a fact no one would want to see their kids, their family members, their relatives, their loved ones go through what these children are going through. No one wants to see that. No one wants to go through with that. No one wants to live through that. So if this is an issue that you're upset about, that angers you, that you want to learn more about, now's the time to get actively involved. Now's the time to step up. Now's the time to do the right thing. We as citizens have power, and these elected officials are public servants. Remember that. They work for us. They are public servants, not the other way around. And we have the power to elect them out of office. We have the power to really make our voices heard. If we don't use our power, if we don't make our voices heard, this policy and programs similar to ICE are going to keep on going on. And do we turn a blind eye to it, or do we stand up and fight for each other?
Also, I want to make one last note, just to give a little... If for the Trump supporters out there, there was a woman who actually spoke at a Trump rally. She was herself an immigrant, and spoke at a Trump rally how much she loved Trump. She just got deported.
Yeah.
So doesn't matter your allegiance. They don't see it as that. Again, we always want to make the distinction between the people and the private interests and the government entity. Really talking about the latter two. They don't care.
The establishment will never care.
That's not the point. The point is that if not, what is it? At first they came for the blank, then it did nothing. Then this is one of those situations.
One other thing too. It might not have any relation to this, but I remember seeing a protest sign when Trump first got elected into office. How if Clinton won, we would all be at brunch right now. Even if Hillary Clinton won, ICE would still be around, and I really doubt that the photos of the children being detained.
Care as much.
No one would care as much. No one would say anything, and people would be at brunch. Now's not the time to be falling asleep.
Now's not the time to go to brunch.
Yeah, and now's not the time to really hope that some corporate Democrat, whether it's Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton or any other corporate establishment Democrat, should they run in 2020, we should not expect them to step up and do the right thing, because this happened under Obama, all right? And we all remember that 2008 campaign that he had. So if it's going to happen under his watch, you can only imagine how it's going to happen under an establishment Democrat's watch.
What you have to worry about with politicians, don't look at their message. I think the way more influential thing to see is watch who backs them, who gives them money, who they surround themselves with. That's way more important than who they are.
Daniel, I know we got to move on to another story, but I got to mention this quote again. It's from Donald Trump from the first Republican primary, especially when it comes down to money and politics. He said before he started running for office, "I give these people money, and they do what I say." And he was talking about the politicians, and there were some candidates on that stage.
And they said, who's taking money from Donald Trump? Everyone raised their hand.
Almost everyone raised their hand. He said, "I give these people money, and they do what I say." And just rewind the clocks back, just way back in the 90s, when he was a Democratic supporter and Hillary Clinton was running for Senate in New York. He gave her money, and she probably did what he said too. So, like Daniel said, watch who supports these corporate Democrats. Watch who backs them. Watch who gives them money. Now's the time for us to be informed and step up, because what's happening at the border is wrong and barbaric. That being said, next story, guys.
So in Oklahoma?
It's in Oklahoma? All right, yeah.
We have some. After a much downtrodden story, we have a little more a higher up
We're
story.
Have a roller coaster of a show today. It's going to be up, down,
yes,
up, down.
yeah. So the first two stories, definitely Foxconn, and of course its environmental and economic impact, and then there's of course the protest that happened in Pilsen, abolishing ICE. So here's a lighter note and a higher note. The state of Oklahoma, the voters voted to legalize cannabis
in Oklahoma.
For medical use. So
higher note indeed.
So this is the 30th state in the nation to allow broad access to medical cannabis. This is a fantastic turnaround, especially in a southern state. Again, this is just showing growing support for cannabis, at least in the state of Oklahoma, for medical use, not for recreational use. That's Colorado, Washington, California, and Oregon have it for recreational use. At least that's the best of my knowledge right now. Illinois has the potential for recreational use, but right now where we stand, we only have it for medical use as well. And so let's look at the proposal, which passed by 57 to 43% margin. That's a pretty big number, 57 to 43. If we just look at just the fact that with the propaganda of how cannabis is a danger, at least at how our government wants to make cannabis seem as a threat to people and health, it's quite clear that they're losing that old school propaganda, and they're losing that battle. So guys, I want to get your thoughts on this and how this is probably going to lead to more changes in how we view cannabis in our country.
So I think that once it got passed in Colorado, I knew it was going to be legal, because, again, it goes to, like we were talking in the previous story, the system of the U.S., if you understand how the power structure works, is incredibly predictable how it will act. So as soon as you got that first state making money, you have all these other states that said, I'd like to make money too. Yeah. I'd like to make more money at that.
And especially with the conservative areas in Colorado who were originally against it. As the first 2 years went by, eventually they changed their attitude towards cannabis and its legalization and the economic benefits. But I want to also let people know, here's how at least the law will affect some of the people who will be living in Oklahoma. So legal patients will receive like a state ID cards and will be allowed to possess 3 ounces of cannabis in public and store up to 8 ounces at home. Now, as for home cultivation of 6 mature plants and 6 seedlings is allowed. It's kind of a little bit better than Canada, what they have it, but okay.
Yeah. Their medical's like, have as much weed as you want.
As in possession up to 1 ounce of cannabis concentrates and 72 ounces of cannabis-infused edible products. Patients are also allowed to have a caregiver to purchase or grow the medicine for them. That's fantastic. That's wonderful news for the people who live in Oklahoma. It's quite clear that they're going to be living high for a while.
Paul has a little graphic for us.
I was curious about how many states had actually passed medical marijuana already.
Okay.
So I have a cool little map here. So there are 9 states that have passed. 9 states and the District of Columbia have passed fully recreational legalized cannabis.
Okay.
An additional 21 states have passed medical cannabis laws. So that's a total of 30 states where medical cannabis is legal. And then the rest of the states, except for 4, allow for non-psychoactive CBD as a medical cannabis product. So there are only 4 states in the country where you cannot get medical cannabis.
Pretty crazy for a drug that, according to the federal government, has no medical use at all.
Yeah, very strange.
Yeah,
highly addictive.
But meanwhile in the United States, we have a growing opioid crisis, and according to all the recent medical research data, medical cannabis is the best source for people to get away from their addiction to opioids. You would almost think that the government just refuses to acknowledge the benefits of cannabis.
You would almost think that the government making cannabis illegal had nothing to do with health consequences and everything to do with power and control. I mean, you can go back to when it was first made illegal. I mean, I think the best way to think of it is cannabis has been legal for 3,000 years, but not legal for 75. So you go to, well, why was it made illegal in the first place? Well, after the Mexican-American War, there were a bunch of Mexicans who, became U.S. citizens, and one thing they would do is they would smoke. Well, that couldn't stand because they were Mexican. At the same time that was happening, the paper industry was competing with this really strong crop called hemp, which could do a whole lot of things, including making paper much more efficient that's way better for the environment. So that couldn't stand. So a confluence of racism, that's actually where the word marijuana came from. It was an attack. It's something different now, but that's what it meant originally because it sounded Spanish, and that makes it scarier. And then they would use the same thing that they used later, which was, Mexicans that smoke this will take white women and rape them. And then later, when you have Nixon, who were his two, and so you had some laws that were against it. It was, it was bad, but it wasn't.
The beginnings of the war on drugs.
Yeah, exactly. It was like the difference between immigration pre-ICE or maybe like Bush's ICE and Obama's ICE. And so then you can get to that second part where it's Nixon, and his second in command, I forget his name, but he had that very famous quote where he admitted that the reason that they made it illegal and they declared the war on drugs that we're still fighting today, which by numbers is, to the story we're talking about with immigration, has caused far more devastation over a longer period of time to far more people. And they did it not because it was unhealthy or any other reason.
Public health issue.
It was because their political opponents were black and hippies, and if you made it illegal, you could take down their base of operations, arrest their leaders, and demonize them every night in the nightly news again, because the news is propaganda for the most part.
Which is owned by the corporations.
And it's connected very much to power and what power does.
Well, that's a good sort of, laying the groundwork. I want to make clear, and I've made this point before, as states move toward recreational use of marijuana, as states move toward medical use of marijuana, one of the most important things we need to be vigilant watchdogs about is who is benefiting financially. Is there anyone who's being given exclusive rights for selling, or are the licensing measures discriminatory? Are people who are in a position to try and enter this new market being given a free market to try and enter, or are we handing the keys to the kingdom to an existing entity already? Because that's what happens in a lot of places.
Chances are it's going to be handed to an existing entity already, and I say this because a lot of players, especially those who want to earn more money, especially a lot of corporations who want to invest in new revenues, they're going to lay just a little foundation, a groundwork. But I wonder how these facilities and corporations that are going to be, benefiting from cannabis legalization, how they will compare against Canada. As we all know, look, we have state rights, and of course, unfortunately, many states that have recreational use for cannabis are currently under threat from Jeff Sessions. So at the state level, cannabis, be it for recreational or medical use, it's legal, but on a national level, it's not. And so when we compare it to Canada, though, they have it legal at the national level, province level, territories, municipalities, you name it. So they already have a system set up, and they're going to be building a much more stronger infrastructure than we will have.
It's something we brought up on our show. If you haven't seen that show, it's a couple weeks. You can probably look back.
Last week.
Last week. You can look on our YouTube page. You'll see that story. That Canada, because it's legal in Canada, they have access to banks, which isn't true with the states that are legalized here. So Canada's going to have a huge head start building up on this, and the U.S. will lag behind. But again, once it was legal in Colorado, this is the exact cascade, because if you take the thing that you say, well, it being Schedule 1 is just made for political purposes so that you can arrest people. It's used as a tool of oppression, and you accept that's what it's always been about, and that all the propaganda, the DARE program, everything, all those things are put together. They came from a source of, we're using this to take away people we don't like and put them in jail, not we're trying to keep people healthy. And misinformation, and it goes and goes and goes. And this right here, and you see even Republicans, like you said, in Colorado are liking it, it shows that all of this was a farce from the beginning, and they knew it was a farce from the beginning, but
just like
were convinced otherwise. Yes.
Yeah, just like Prohibition, this war on drugs is a joke. It's a failed test of morality. It's a childish notion to think that you can stop humans from doing things that they want to do. Human nature is this: we're going to do things no matter what, and if it means breaking the law, they'll go ahead and do it. But as soon as Prohibition ended in the late 1930s, all of a sudden it was legal, there was revenue, and there was also regulations and protections to make sure people wouldn't go blind or get poisoned by drinking alcohol. So the thing is, what I want people to remember too is, once cannabis is legalized, we have to also take certain aspects into account. Look, the United States is the richest, most powerful country in the world, but we also have the most incarcerated population in the world as well.
Mainly because of marijuana.
Mainly because of cannabis. Mainly because people are holding cannabis like just a small bag. And so once it's legal, we have to look at all those people behind bars. Personally, we have to release them and pardon them.
They need reparations.
They need reparations.
They're in jail for no reason.
They need to be pardoned. They need to be given back their rights, and also ensure that there's a program to help them get back into the workforce. Because just because we have the freedom then to enjoy cannabis doesn't mean we have to turn a blind eye to people put in jail for a crime that's no longer illegal.
So let's go over this just to build on what you're saying.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so you have the desire. I don't like these opponents that are against me politically, so I'm going to have, in a sense, I'm going to make a political prison, but I'm going to call it something else because, the U.S., of course, it's illegal to make a political prison. Who would ever think that we would ever do that? So we just do it under something else. So what's the America has reinstituted slavery because of the loophole in the 14th Amendment, and so if you're in prison, well, guess what? You get to do prison labor, which is slavery. I mean, let's just say it as it is. You put people who otherwise would be doing nothing illegal, you put them in prison. You're causing Central and South America to just get eaten alive by drug cartels, which are simply filling a supply and demand economy because they can produce it where it couldn't be produced within the U.S. You have people, when you go into jail, you lose about 3,000 rights as an American citizen, and no one wants to hire you. So every time it happens, you destroy someone's lives, and it's mainly done for people of color. Because, if you're Caucasian, weed's been legal for a while. Just unofficially. You just don't want to flaunt it around. But if you're not, it's a great way. How many times have you heard the original evidence to search for someone's car is, I smelled weed? How are you going to deny that? What, the smell went away? I don't know. Oh, look at that. I found something here. it's just like in Prohibition, only it's worse because it's on an industrial scale.
Yep.
It's something that was done. So that was, again, the desire was, I want to stifle political action, so I'm going to regress the entire country into a slavery era. And we around us, most people weren't aware of this. They're still not truly aware that we've brought back slavery because we wanted to lock away political opponents.
Yep.
This is literally what North Korea does. They take their political opponents and they put them in jail and make them do hard labor. America takes its political opponents, says they're not political opponents, makes it a policy that's we swear not our political opponents, and then puts them in jail and makes them do hard labor.
Yeah, and let's remember who really benefits from cannabis still being illegal and from imprisoning populations. There's the prison industrial complex. There is the alcohol and tobacco industry, and finally the pharmaceutical industry, and to a lesser extent paper industry, because they have to then compete against hemp, and hemp is a very reliable source compared to what we use for paper, from trees and everything else. So
I think the internet is a bigger threat to the paper
yeah,
industry.
of course. But you guys get what I'm trying to say. But I had to mention it because, of course, one of the main reasons why cannabis was illegal, because for a long time the paper industry had to compete against hemp. So there's a lot of groups that are really against this. And remember, because we live in a system, thanks to Citizens United and the McCutcheon decision, where money is speech and corporations are people, the prison industrial complex, big tobacco, big alcohol, and the pharmaceutical industry can give millions of dollars to political candidates, be they Democrat or Republican, and have them say, hey, make sure that cannabis remains illegal. Don't legalize it. We'll make sure that you're set for the rest of your life. And that's the system we live in. And so what happened in Oklahoma is great. They got it legalized at the medical level. And, we're seeing public opinion change. And one thing is, these large industries and corporations that give money to these politicians that want cannabis to remain illegal are going to lose, because you can give all the money in the world to these politicians, but public opinion is going to change, and public opinion will always supersede what the 1% will always want, because eventually people are going to stand up and say enough is enough.
I think another thing is, if you look at the news media, nothing has changed. And if I'm going to say something, and if you were on CNN, they'd go, "Oh, that's impossible." Mm-hmm. The government lies. The government, just like any entity that's ever existed, it's like humans lie, groups of humans make lies together, and bigger groups make lies together. This was a lie from the start. And I still look at that map you have up, and you see that lie slowly but steadily being eroded. The truth doesn't die, it just goes underground. And now it's coming back, and people are going to be a little more free on one issue. And again, it's ridiculous. Just, again, realize how power organizes itself and how you contribute to it. If people don't vote, then people that have an interest in voting for money reasons will be the only ones voting, and that's their interest. So, again, we could go back to the primary in Illinois where only 3% of people 18 to 25 voted. That's giving power away. Like I said, even if you didn't like anyone to vote for, or you weren't like, this is good, being lazy is not an excuse at all. If you have your rights taken away, that's a whole separate issue, but being lazy is despicable when it comes to this, because everyone has the ability to change the system. If everyone decided, if all millennials in elections, if 100% of millennials, which I know is impossible, but if 100% of millennials voted in 3 primaries consecutively, we would control the entire government. Yeah. It's that simple.
Yeah. It's that simple. All right. That being said, we got another story to cover. Paul.
Yeah, I want to move on. I want to just sort of make this a quick hit, but just wanted to keep this on people's radar. There is a bill that the House Committee on Foreign Affairs passed a voice vote to slightly amend called the, where's the name of the bill? The Israel Anti-Boycott Act. It essentially makes it illegal to participate in the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Right, if you wanted to boycott Israel because of the apartheid state with Palestine, basically, if you're upset about that and want to have a political voice in that arena, the U.S. government wants to not only make that illegal but hand the enforcement arm of that to the Trump administration, make it an executive thing.
Well, wait, so you're saying people that don't like their political opponents to fight Israel are making laws that don't sound like political opponents to make it illegal for them to take actions that they can hurt them from. It's such an odd thing.
It's super anti-First Amendment. It's really, really disgusting in that regard. And to try and legislate the views that an individual or a company can make. And one of the weird things, one of the weird questions I have is, okay, who decides if you're participating in a boycott movement? If I have a Middle Eastern restaurant and I don't buy Sabra hummus to put on my table, am I participating in the BDS movement? Is somebody going to come in?
You better buy that Sabra.
Better buy that Israeli hummus, otherwise I'm going to have the Trump administration kicking down my door and telling me that I have to get my mind right.
This is the free market Republicans speak of course.
Yeah, but here's the thing. When we look at how Israel's acted, its past actions towards the Palestinians, it's no wonder that many people are starting to question Israel's policies towards Palestine and where the United States stands in regards to Israel and its actions, especially towards its neighbor. So, the fact that you have this law being passed and that, this is being allowed, it should really cause some concern, because what else will they pass? What else will they then start writing down saying that what we can and cannot do? Paul? So
this is one of the things to keep this on your radar, but one of the real pernicious things about a bill like this is while it's obviously anti-First Amendment, pro-Israel PACs, and AIPAC is of course all over this, really like this because it forces individuals who do want to participate in this protest and do want to call attention to human rights abuses that are happening in Israel. It forces us to now be on the defense about protecting our own First Amendment rights instead of talking about what we really wanted to talk about in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's pernicious in that way.
Imagine if South Africa had such close ties to the U.S., they would have still been an apartheid state.
Perhaps.
Yeah, perhaps. And so now, with that being said, we are going to be entering into our break. So we'll be joining you guys in just a few short minutes as we go into the second hour. But I want everyone to know, if you want to learn more about Hard Lens Media, we have a website, hardlensmedia.com. That way you can learn more about us, about the team, and you can find all our social media links as well, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Spreaker, and Twitter. And if you like what we do, if you support independent media, we have a Patreon page. Your support is the main heart and backbone to everything that we do here. It allows us to get more gear, to be in the field more, and to produce more content for our viewing audiences here.
And I want to say with people, we do this because we care about. This is what we're passionate about. This is what we want to do. This is what is meaningful to us. We want to keep building this up. We want to keep adding people to our team. We want to keep expanding what we do to reach more people and talk about these issues that just aren't talked about. So if you say, man, I could give $12 a year, that's $1 a month, go to patreon.com, Hard Lens Media. We would love that. If you can say, I can give up, I don't have to go to get a $5 footlong from Jared every month. We would love to do that. And
he's no longer the mascot, though.
Oh, well, he's a lifelong mascot, even if he isn't now. That you get to do that, and at the end of every one of our videos, your name will be there showing that you support us. If you do our highest, our $10, you can come into our studio, you can sit with us and listen to the show, come see the guests. We have a lot of amazing guests coming up, and you also get to see some of our stuff in advance, but really it helps us because we still do work we still work. This is what we do in our spare time for you guys, but it's also for us to really do something that's for you guys to hear and to take and to see value in. So if you can put $10 a month in, that's fantastic. If you want to, we don't have anything above 10, but if you want to do that, that's fine. But you guys keep us going, and we want to keep you going. We want this to be a system. We want to make a real healthy system, a healthy cycle, not what we were talking about in the previous stories, something that brings value to both of our lives, keeps you guys informed, and lets us keep doing what we're doing. So if that's something you're interested in, just hit us up on Patreon. You can go to our website. There's a link there. But help us help you, and so that in reverse as well.
Yeah. All right. With that being said, see you guys in the second hour. Peace. And we are back. Welcome to the second hour of Hard Lens Media. Sorry for the earlier technical mishaps in the first hour. Hey, look, it happens. We're only human, but we do the best we can with the resources we have. So, as I mentioned before, we do have a Patreon page. So, if you want to support us, it will really help us out a lot.
Patreon.com/hardlensmedia.
Absolutely. So, that being said, this is the second hour of Hard Lens Media. We got a lot of stories to talk about, a lot of issues to address, and also we may be possibly having our second guest joining us a little bit later in our second hour. That will be seen, so we'll keep you guys in the loop what's happening. We are live streaming on the Hard Lens Media Facebook page, and if you're listening to us on the radio, it's 1680 a.m., or you could go to the Q4 Radio website, q4radio.org. That being said, let's get started with a very important story that's going to affect us for generations, and that is recently Supreme Court Justice
Anthony Kennedy.
Anthony Kennedy, at age 81, is going to be retiring on July 31st, and so that means President Donald Trump will be selecting his potential replacement. So, and so, this is definitely cause for concern, because one of the issues that people have been bringing up is that, he may be, a
little on the conservative side. You think?
The Supreme Court, the Supreme Court will be conservative for many years. So
we already had a real conservative Supreme Court, right? I mean,
a neoliberal
for sure. But Anthony Kennedy sort of represented the swing vote. He was often the deciding vote in lots and lots of cases, and he leaned pretty conservative. You just get, this is right on the heels of the travel ban being upheld at the Supreme Court level, which I don't know how they're able to do that. Simply ignore that Trump is stating that he wants to get Muslims out of the country. He said that explicitly on the campaign trail. And then they go ahead and say, well, that's just specific countries. It's not a specific Muslim ban. It's like, yeah, but it is. But now Trump is going to have the opportunity of naming yet another justice. Now, this comes also on the heels of the Obama administration failing to get Merrick Garland approved, right?
Yeah.
Largely that appeared to be a political tactic, right? In the election between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, if you don't have a Supreme Court pick secured from the last administration because Republicans are being obstructionist, now you get to say, oh, well, we can't have Trump because he'll get to appoint a Supreme Court judge. Well, we just gamed that one already. We got Neil Gorsuch out of that.
Yeah.
And now who knows what we're going to get. So we're going to have a very, very right-leaning, very conservative-leaning court for the foreseeable future, right? This is going to be potentially an assault on abortion rights in this country. And you may have, even more further, solidification of corporate rights and corporate power and business friendly, as they say, legislation come out of this.
Again, I want to add just a little bit more to what you said there, Paul. Look, the way the Supreme Court is set up right now, it's still very pro-business friendly. Corporations are still going to get what they want, but policy issue, it's going to be conservative. So that means, again, it's going to be attack on abortion rights. It's going to be attack on women's issues, the LGBTQ community, immigration, you name it, including even cannabis legalization as well. So the Supreme Court will be right-leaning for a very long time. So even if there is a blue wave and there's a president, a Democratic president, we're still going to have a Republican conservative Supreme Court. And it's pretty devastating as people are now evolving their positions on certain issues and lifestyles, and the fact that this is another opportunity for Trump to have another Supreme Court justice, to select another Supreme Court justice. It shows us that elections matter, and this is where we have to keep things accountable. We have to hold our elected officials accountable and really be careful on who we select into office, no matter what it is, be at the state level, federal level, you name it.
This is my impression of Donald Trump interviewing judges that he might nominate. Listen, I have just one question. Am I allowed to pardon myself? This is the litmus test.
I don't know, Daniel. What would you like to weigh in on this?
Well, I, from my point of view, every judge that Trump elects is the fault of the Democrats. This was their race to lose. This was them, like Paul said, a strategy to try and get people to vote. And I've always stated that if you can't beat Trump by more than 10 points, you aren't good enough. Trump is one of the easiest politicians you could ever hope to run against. And in fact, even like we know from like Hillary Clinton, she did the Pied Piper strategy of
Yeah, that's
actually
who she
trying
wanted to run against.
and she did that. She got exactly what she paid for. So this entire thing, every judge that gets elected is the fault of Democratic leadership. This was their race to lose. Again, on paper, Republicans have the smaller demographic, the more unpopular issues. They have tactics and a history that's despicable, but they're smart, they're resourceful, they're well-funded, and the Democrats, who on paper win in a much larger demographic sense, can on paper take far more states, have the issues that people care about, and they still lose because they aren't smart, they roll over, they have no spine, and they're paid to lose. This is... it's like if you have some, I don't know, like some 20-year veteran boxer, and you have some guy who's like, I decided 5 weeks ago I would start training. If that guy loses, the veteran boxer loses, you cannot call it a victory for that guy. It's a defeat that was self-imposed. That's what this was. Every justice that goes on is caused by the failure of the Democratic Party, because the Republicans have a coalition. The Democrats have, they have on every sense of the word, a bigger coalition. They just aren't utilizing it. You can't blame the Republicans for doing what they do when the Democrats refuse to counter it.
Yeah, and Obama did have the chance. Obama did have the chance to put in his Supreme Court nominee, but when the Republicans started screaming and yelling at him, what did Obama do? He caved. What did the Democrats in the Senate and House do? They caved. They didn't address an issue that they had the power and the right to address. But again, Obama's selection for the Supreme Court was a very pro-corporate business guy. That was
not a great choice either.
Yeah,
right.
and on top of that, he was selected by the Republicans at first before Trump was starting to gain traction. They liked him.
Obama's like, I know I want the half loaf, but let's start negotiating. Let's do it for a quarter.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like, I'll put the Republican FBI person. Oh, that backfired a little bit. I'm going to do Obamacare, Republican plan. Oh, that backfired.
A Mitt Romney plan.
Yeah, a Heritage Foundation plan.
Yeah, there we go.
It's like Obama was it's like the Democrats are Republicans that want to be more right but don't want to act like it.
Exactly.
So this is my take on it. Republicans have a history of, you're right, utilizing their coalition. Under Obama, we kept calling them obstructionistic, right?
Yeah.
But it worked, right? That they can force their hand, they can force their positions. Democrats have a tendency to want to come in and pre-capitulate a point. Oh, we're never going to get $15 an hour minimum wage. Let's just try for 12. How about you go to the bargaining table asking for 15 and see if it goes down
Republicans
to 12?
start at 0 and work their way up.
Right. So in this case, there is technically an opportunity. I forget where I read this, but there is an opportunity for the Democrats to play hardball even here. So in the Senate, you need a quorum to conduct business, right? And you need to, in the Senate, confirm a Supreme Court nomination. So you could very easily, right, there are 51 Republican senators and 49 Democratic senators. If all 49 Democratic senators refuse to show up, there is one Republican senator who is in the hospital, John McCain. Only 50 Republican senators would show up. You wouldn't have a quorum. You wouldn't have a majority there.
I do have a question. Now, we all know that the office of vice presidency is officially the tie-breaking vote in the Senate because the vice president is technically
it wouldn't matter.
Would it not matter?
He's not a senator. They wouldn't have a quorum. They need a majority of the senators to be there.
51 senators to be in a room.
51 senators need to be there.
So in other words, Vice President Mike Pence is not a factor to be held.
No.
It would only matter. He's a tie-breaking vote, but if there's no vote, there's no vote to tie-break.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you.
I don't expect them to play hardball like that.
The Democrats are going to be like, "Well, take it. It's fine. Well, we don't care. We're not going to do the same thing." And again, Mitch McConnell, he's two-faced, but that's fine because that's not his goal is not to be a leader with integrity. He's good at holding power. Mm-hmm. Nancy Pelosi is fantastic at holding power. She just doesn't do anything with it, whereas McConnell does stuff with it.
Yeah, and see, the thing is, I'm glad you mentioned Nancy Pelosi because remember, this is the same Nancy Pelosi that was screaming that Trump's a threat and he's a fascist and he's going to be spying on us. But when It all came down to the voting for the national, to increasing more funding for the National Security Act for, basically eavesdropping on all our personal emails. Nancy Pelosi voted in favor of it. And plus,
she got other Democrats to vote for it, too.
Yeah, and not to mention, too, I also want to bring us back home to the state of Illinois. Senator Dick Durbin did send out a tweet and stated that, we should consider supporting whoever the Supreme Court nominee President Donald Trump picks. Wow, Senator Dick Durbin, great job of being part of the Mick resistance. I mean, boy, you guys in the Democratic establishment.
We say we're against Trump, but we go with him.
Yeah, you guys are really good at resisting.
Yeah. Why fight when you can roll over and make money? Because that's the thing. If you're a senator, and especially in the Democratic Party, you can make a lot of money. I mean, they're all millionaires. I mean, Sanders it's very hard to not have money when you're a senator. It's very hard to be as poor as Sanders is for as long as he's been in office.
Oh, but he's got that $700 jacket.
Oh, man.
A $700 jacket?
$700. They're like, I have $3,700 ties.
Yeah. Well, and again, the one thing that I could say to people who are probably scared about, Donald Trump's pick for the Supreme Court, now's not a time to be defeated or frightened. Now's a time to step up and get involved. Because remember, there are other offices, seats of power, and judicial offices at the state level, at the county level that, if we look at who's running for those offices, now's the time to really look at the candidates and why they're running for office and the issues and who's backing them. Now's the time to implement our power. Okay, so this thing that's happening in the Supreme Court, yes, that's one thing, but then there's also us as well. Citizens, we have the power to get involved and to actually put in people that will represent us, to where the Supreme Court cannot, as much as they want to make their rulings, they cannot ignore the mass amount of people that are changing how they view certain policies and issues.
Here, I want to say this directly to mainly people that are like Clintonite type people. Do you really want these people leading your party? If you hate Trump so much, doesn't it make sense that you would want, even if they're even if you go with the policies you like, wouldn't you at least like the Democratic Party to actually fight Trump rather than just say they're fighting Trump?
Yeah, because they haven't done it.
Right now, you have like Chuck Schumer with his glasses on his nose. You have Nancy Pelosi with her master legislating. What have they done for you? What have they actually done for you? And take away, if you're like the people that are like, I make $200,000 a year, they've done a lot for me. Okay, great, congratulations. What have they actually done for you?
Have they led with their values?
Have they led with not even their values? Have they led with your values? Are you happy that we have 2 Supreme Court justices? It was their strategy that you followed because they told you it would work, but it didn't. They didn't have a spine. They didn't fight. They didn't try. They gave up.
They had to cheat during the primaries. I mean, let's face it. Look, let us never forget that in 2016, the Democratic establishment and Clinton campaign were working together during the 2016 Democratic primary to commit election fraud and deny Bernie Sanders the nomination.
And
at the end of the day,
relationship so much people just sat out. And again, if she had won the primary and hadn't cheated, I think it's almost guaranteed she would have won the election.
Yeah, but the election fraud was so out there that people were upset and angry. And look, let's really look at this. The fact that there was so much election fraud and so many voters that were purged and rigged voting machines and so many other issues that happened, you really have to take this very seriously, that Clinton was not a true legitimate nominee.
Are these the leaders you want in Washington? Ones that will really just lay down all the Republicans take? Do you want the Republican Party to win? Do you want the Republican Party to continue winning? Do you think that the current leadership, who has been there for decades, that has continuously lost thousands of seats on state, local, and federal levels, do they really have your interests? Or do they have their own interests, their own money, their own investments, and you are what they take for granted?
I want to bring it back to the Supreme Court real briefly. We are on right after the Muslim ban is upheld officially at the Supreme Court, and we get, Anthony Kennedy's announcement that he's stepping down, and we know that we're going to get another very conservative, very pro-business judge on the court. At what point does the Supreme Court become so out of touch with the wishes of the American people that they lose legitimacy. Like, it's not impossible. I mean, thoughts?
Well, I think the last time this was an issue, FDR put a bunch. The reason we have 9 Supreme Court judges is because of that issue previously.
Yeah.
What exactly
Originally, FDR
threatened them with.
No, he stacked the court.
No, he was originally going to stack the court with 32 judges, but eventually got negotiated down to 9. It was getting to the point.
That's a guy. He says he doesn't come halfway. He doesn't say let's do 2 more. He says let's do 24 more, and they're like, how about just 3? Okay.
Yeah. There you go.
So, and so, relating back to this story, I know there's a lot of people that are afraid and concerned. And you know what? We have every right to be a little bit afraid and concerned, but we can't let that fear consume us. This is the time where we use our power. Look, we saw what happened. We covered this in the first hour with Foxconn, with the people organizing and rallying to stop the construction of this facility. Or even if it is built, we talked to one governor candidate that's actually talking about getting it out of the state of Wisconsin. When we were in
action, Democrats doing action.
When we were in Pilsen yesterday, we saw over around 2,000 people protesting and calling for the abolishment of ICE. Right now, what's happening here in Chicago, there's another large protest that's happening, calling for the abolishment of ICE. When people rally together and fight for a cause and an issue that's really affecting us all, change can happen. It can be done. Me and Daniel were both volunteers for Wolfpack, and we managed to get passed in the Illinois State Senate and House SJR 42, which is calling for an Article 5 convention that's proposing a constitutional amendment to get money out of politics. When people rally together, when people organize and use their power, we can change the system. Yes, the system is corrupt. Yes, the system is inept, but it doesn't mean we have to live with it. I'm tired of this neoliberal two-party establishment system with the corporate media telling us that everything's all okay and that we just got to keep on going and that's just how things are. We just got to call things in the middle 50-50 and that, well, there's some things that we can do, but we can't do all of them. No, that is crap. We've been lied to enough. Now's the time where we actively use our power and we actually hold these political officials accountable. They are public servants. Again, they work for us, not the other way around. And if they fail at their job, we vote them out.
That's right.
And also part of that is getting people that you don't agree with to vote with you in coalition. I think there's a really fun meme. I'll try and say it, but it's people. So it's like right wingers say, "Hey, can we do genocide?" People on the left say, "Hey, no, we can't do genocide. That's terrible." And then people in the center say, hey, how about if we do a little bit of genocide? And then people on the left say, no, that's crazy. We can't do that. And then people in the center say, look at how left-wing and radical you are. This is the time to demand action. This is the time to seize power. And in our next story, we're going to talk about someone who did just that.
Yep.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys heard, progressives had a big win in New York's 14th district.
Boy, wow. A little bit of side story about New York. They got closed primaries, and, if we all know how messed up Illinois politics are, but New York, I mean, they have us beat. For a minute, I was surprised. But, Paul, what exactly happened in the 14th district?
Just before you go, to give you an idea of how corrupt New York is, in the Voting Rights Act, it was, of course, made for segregation issues. So there were a bunch of states that had to have any laws changes they wanted checked by the government, and one state in the north, and that state is New York. This is, as much as Chicago's, we've talked a lot about the primaries here, New York has us beat.
So New York's 14th district is the most diverse district in the country, congressional district. It basically is Queens and the Bronx. That was the district where Joe Crowley had his House seat. Now, Joe Crowley, if you aren't familiar, basically was sort of the heir apparent for the House. He basically was going to take over Nancy Pelosi's job whenever she stepped down. So basically the number 4 Democrat in the country. He came into office in 1999. He ran unopposed since 2004 in perhaps the most blue district in the country, or one of the most blue districts in the country. He was upset and it surprised all of the establishment media and a lot of pro-business lobbyists that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez took him down. Ocasio-Cortez is a Democratic Socialist. She's a card-carrying DSA member. She supports a Green New Deal, Medicare for all, public housing projects, She's
Federal jobs guarantee.
Federal jobs guarantee.
Abolishing ICE.
It's hilarious. Did you guys see the Hannity segment where he's like, look at these scary policies? I'm like,
we'll get to that later.
She wants to
love.
support the elderly. How dare she?
Yeah.
That's most of my right.
How dare she try to propose a minimum standard of life in this country, this wealthiest country of
the country
in the
with
history of the
unlimited
world.
money.
It's amazing how quickly establishment press dismissed this candidate. They thought it was going to be a landslide for Crowley, and then when she won, they're all like, "What happened? How did that?" They're super caught off guard, and then you get the same tired old, "Oh, socialism doesn't work. She just wants to give people free stuff," but she's running unopposed in an extremely blue district. She's basically going to win.
Here's the thing I have an issue with, because they usually, again, we said it before, it's they're happy to give corporations free stuff, but aren't corporations people? Don't they love giving people free stuff?
The thing I also found really, really interesting and a little bit infuriating is the coverage the day after almost universally describes it as Joe Crowley was unseated by a new contender.
They didn't even give her name.
They don't give her name. They don't want to give any legitimacy to this. They don't want to drum up support. But hey, I'm sorry, she's going to get in. Like, the Republicans are not going to win. And people took note. We mentioned Kristen Gillibrand coming out in opposition to ICE. I don't think she would have done that if Ocasio-Cortez did not win.
Even Governor Cuomo just came out and said that, too.
Right. I think people realize the winds are changing.
Yeah, and the thing is, you could rig primaries and elections as much as you want, but you get enough people to turn out to vote and especially support a candidate that is not backing down. Because early on during her campaign, there were small media outlets that were covering her. The largest media outlet that really interviewed her the most was the Young Turks, which is hosted by Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian. So
they've been covering her for like the last year.
Yeah, and she Cortez was definitely also supported by Justice Democrats, Brand New Congress, a little bit of Our Revolution, but mostly she was gaining a lot of support from the Democratic Socialists of America. And so this shows you that her campaign was really doing its job, especially reaching out to potential voters, because it was getting to the point to where they were collecting polling data, and she was beating the incumbent. And it got to the point to where the incumbent's campaign was like, okay, we have to have a debate. Like, we have no choice but to sit down and really debate against this candidate. And when it came down to it, he was decimated. I don't know if you guys ever get a chance to check out like their first debate. He did not stand a chance. He reminded me a little bit of, dare I say it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel. He reminded me a little bit of Chris Kennedy, just a little bit, because he just didn't seem like he knew what to say or talk about or do.
And
because
she was aggressive.
She was aggressive, unapologetic, and she was fighting for progressive issues. And she didn't apologize for her stance on anything. And she even asked him straight out about his stance on ICE and why aren't you calling for its abolishment? Why aren't you using your power?
You've called them fascists, but you don't want to get rid of them. He's like, oh, I think. And then the next, there was two more debates that they were supposed to do, and he sent one of his surrogates, who was also a younger, a Latin woman, and it's like, oh, you just sent a mirror image to fight me. What are you trying to do? Just because you think that because I'm a young woman, that another young woman will beat me?
That was really insulting too. Because look, that person you sent isn't running for office. That person you sent isn't in a seat of power. You are in a seat of power, and that showed weakness. That showed incompetence on the incumbent's part, because, okay, so wait, you're going to send somebody to represent you? That person isn't running for office. You are running for office. Are you afraid to be in a debate with this challenger from DSA? For the most part, corporate media really refuses to acknowledge the power of progressives or the Democratic Socialists of America or any other progressive outlet group, because they think that they have no power. But just imagine, just on that day when they found out that Nancy Pelosi's heir apparent lost, that must have ruined the neoliberal establishment so much. That they must have been panicking and having emergency phone calls, just trying to figure out, what do we do? And then you got to think too, like, oh wait, these guys can win, and they can organize, and they're getting support. And our normal voting base, they're not voting for us as much as en masse. It's happening here. And if it can happen in New York, where they got closed primaries and more corruption than we do in this state, and that's saying a lot, change is happening.
That's what this proves, right? It proves that if you go out on these policy ideas win. It proves that you can win even when you're outspent by a margin of 10-1. She spent $300,000 on the race. Joe Crowley spent $3 million on the race. It's an obscene amount to spend on a congressional primary.
Spending $3 million and still losing.
But it shows that we can win. This strategy
that's funny
works.
to me.
But it shows even further that for the people that say there's no hope, the Democratic Party is too corrupt. It's too corrupt to vote in. It's proof that that's wrong. It means that they will put their elbow on the scale. What I say here in Chicago is it's like a 9% rule. You have to win by 9% more than you should to offset the corruption. It's something you got to do. It's a
And that's
stumbling
what she did.
block.
She won by 15 points.
I also want
exactly.
to give a very special shout out to DSA because look, the Democratic Socialists of America right now they are a political organization, and so far every time they've ran a candidate, then they run them in a Democratic primary. They have a long winning streak. They have been winning every single election. All right, so they're not running as a third party, so they're just a political organization at this point. And we even interviewed some members of Chicago DSA as well, and you can check that out on our YouTube page and Twitter account. And it's quite clear that they're building a movement, they're building infrastructure for the day that when they can finally launch out more candidates to challenge the incumbents, they can win. They have an infrastructure being set up, and a lot of people want to just turn it away and say like it's not going to work, it's not possible. They've been winning, and I think they've been doing better than some of the other progressive groups. I mean, Daniel, do you want to weigh in on this? I mean, I think we were actually talking about this a little bit before the show.
I remember when we went to that conference last summer
at UIC.
Yeah, that
2017.
I was really taken because these were people that looked like they were organized. They looked like they wanted to do something. Their membership got up. They were getting the money to do actions. Then they just started winning in Virginia. Then they started winning in Pennsylvania. We've been covering mainly like Our Revolution, Brand New Congress, Justice Democrats, those groups. But DSA is almost equal in the amount of candidates that they've put up as all those groups combined. I mean, all those groups combined are a little bit more. But DSA has really been killing it in terms of getting people in. And this is actually the second time that a DSA candidate has beat a leadership person in a primary. In Virginia, they beat the House Majority Whip, the Republican. And
Was it for state of Virginia?
For state,
Yeah.
but it was still leadership.
Yeah.
DSA is going to be and is currently a powerhouse that is growing. But again, the point that I want to make to people that are listening is this shows that if enough people act together, you win. If people sit out and don't vote, you will lose, which means the power to change is really in your hands and everyone around you. And it means that if you do put in the effort with the right candidate, with the right policies, with the right charisma, in the right district, you will win. But if you don't, I remember it's people that do a lot of walking. We've done canvassing before. She had a picture of all the shoes she wore out walking. They knocked on so many doors. Every single person that was part of it, if they knock on 1,000 doors over a year, that if the turnout rate was very low, it's like 3%. That's like, what is that? That's like 300 people, or 30 people. So if one person can get 30 people to vote, and in that case, if you get 100 people, it matters. It adds up. If everyone collectively says someone else to do it, no, they won't. You need to do it. If you care, you caring makes you the tip of the iceberg because most people don't care.
I want to point this out too. This is really important. Because establishment thinking would have you believe that winning elections is about intersectionality, right? It's about which demographic groups are you able to capture? Or do you get the minority vote? Do you get the Hispanic vote? Do you get women's vote? Do you get the young? Do you get the old? What Ocasio-Cortez found in their more detailed analysis after the vote, they won in every segment, right? It was not the Latin Americans that came out to vote. It was everyone came out to vote. Young, old, men, women, minority, Caucasian, everyone came out. She won every major segment. Now, young people came out to vote for her more than average, but that wasn't the demographic group that tipped the scale over, which going back to Joe Crowley sending a surrogate that's basically a mirror image of her, shows that intersectionality mentality in establishment thinking, and also sort of inadvertently unmasks it for how disgusting it is. Right? Don't insult our intelligence, right? We're not voting for this person because she's a Hispanic woman. We're voting for this person because we agree with her policies. Also of note, we haven't covered yet, she has family ties with Puerto Rico. And being able to act in the House, that's a pretty big deal for someone who is in a position of power that can offer some kind of relief to Puerto Rico after Maria, after disaster capitalism is taking hold. They've been a little debt haven for the United States for decades now. So some reform with that, and somebody who has personal ties to the island, that's really, really good.
Yeah, and finally Puerto Rico can have some at least representation in the United States House.
Exactly.
I want to return it back to Sean Hannity from Fox News when he was making a list of all the things that she stands for, and he's saying that this is a danger and this is a threat. This is so scary.
How dare we support seniors?
It was free press to her and her campaign, the issues that she was fighting for. Because I'm looking at that list and like, okay, what's so dangerous about it? She's talking about programs and issues that people need. The one thing that's really crippling this country is that we have money for our military-industrial complex. I mean, it takes like what? The military-industrial complex gets like 80% of our budget, 90%?
50%.
50%? I thought it was a little bit higher.
Just a little over 50.
Okay, just a little bit over 50. So the thing is, our military-industrial complex gets so much in regards for resources. I mean, we spend trillions on this ridiculous joint strike fighter that doesn't even work.
Can't fly upside down, can't fly near storms, can't work at night.
Right, and so when she's calling for Medicare,
can't dogfight.
Yeah, so when she's calling for single payer, when she's calling for senior citizen protections and so many other progressive issues, there's nothing dangerous about that. That's helping out the population and the people. And on top of that too, when Sean Hannity was comparing Cortez to Alexandria Cortez to Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. He stated, what's the difference between her and the regular Democrats? Oh, she actually believes and follows through with what she says. Thank you, Hannity, for that free press for her and for DSA, because she believes in these things and will follow through with them, and that's what Americans want. And a sad point, that's kind of how Trump was elected, because people believe that these were issues that he believed and stand for, and for the most part, I think I don't know, but because I don't want to drag Trump into this, but it's just like when voters hear about a candidate that's going to fight for issues and believes in these issues and stands up for them, people will turn out to vote.
And again, this comes down to this is Bernie Sanders' strategy. This is how he ran his entire campaign. It was always about the issues with Sanders. It was always about the issues. And again, he went from, remember, Hillary Clinton, one of the most well-known women in history with all the establishment power, more establishment power than any other presidential candidate has ever had. All the money that could be asked for, the corporate media following every word she said, all the anchors supporting her, all the businesses supporting her. She rigged the primary, and she still barely won against a guy who no one had ever heard of, who, if you went through an intersectionality viewpoint, was a terrible candidate because he's this old guy who has poorly kept hair. Mm-hmm. But that's not why people like Sanders. People like Sanders because of his policy. Policy wins when it's policy. Keep it on policy, run on policy, be convicted by your own words.
And watch out for this. This is what Sean Hannity was trying to do and failed at. It's when media outlets will attempt to smear a Democratic Socialist candidate or a DSA candidate or somebody that holds these progressive views and call them a communist or call them a socialist or they're just trying to give people free stuff. That's the propagandistic smear tactic that is being used against basically their political opponent, someone that threatens their power hegemony, their bottom line, someone who's actually willing to say, hey, maybe we don't need to spend $750 billion a year on our military, and maybe we could spend some to make sure that we have an educated populace and that we can house homeless people and that humans do actually have a right to medicine. Like, these are things that people need and want. When this Jimmy Dore makes this point all the time. We're living in a country where 140 million people live are poor or low income, right? 40-some% of Americans qualify as poor or low income in the wealthiest nation the history of the world has ever seen. That's an abomination. And someone like this coming along and saying we can fix that and leading with those policies not only wins, but again will get smeared by those as being a communist or giving away free stuff.
And also the media really hates this because the media's entire strategy has been cozy up, as much as you can with politicians, get as close as you can, have the Washington Correspondents' Dinner where you sit together with politicians and just basically make the fourth state the government unofficially. And those relationships yield stories that we can talk about. That's never... I mean, if progressives winning and taking over the party, why would they ever talk to corporate media? They could almost on their own make, at least with Democrats, make MSN just irrelevant. Yeah. Why would they ever speak to MSN? Why would they speak to people that are vapid, who hate them, who have for decades ignored their existence, demeaned them, demonized them? Why wouldn't they move towards people that are doing what we're doing? TYT, Humanist Report, all these progressive outlets will become the new media of the future as they rise and as those other companies fall. And also, as television becomes more and more relevant, we are in the midst of a conversion of the old rules that used to be accurate to rules that exist now, that the old rules are not positive, they're detrimental.
I will say it is a bit curious because you're talking about mainstream press becoming more and more relevant because they are trying to force a reality onto the rest of us that it just isn't the reality.
Right.
But it's a head scratcher why Bernie Sanders is so willing to go on CNN and MSNBC all the time, and he won't go on TYT anymore. Like, he hasn't been on TYT since the election. Like,
That's a good question.
I don't understand.
I'd like to. If I could ask him one question, that's actually the one I would want to ask him.
I'm sure he would love to go on. I'm sure Jimmy Dore would want them on. I'm sure Humanist Report would interview him. TYT would have him on again in a heartbeat, but instead you just see him on the Sunday shows.
Well, it's also, I guess, because they're near him.
I mean, it can't
it's not
possibly be a matter of convenience.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, no, it's a good point. It's a really good point. It's a great question, but I think that it's, just like one thing we've been trying to do is, again, it's why we speak to people that press won't talk to. It's someone has to do it. Someone has to reach out, and I'd like to think that in the future, a lot of the people we talk to are able to get that power, and then they will come back to us, and we'll be able to talk more.
I tell you what, we'll ask him that question because Bernie Sanders, you're officially invited on Hardlands Media. Of course, open invite. Anytime.
Again, part of Hardlands Media is getting large enough by 2020 that he'll be on the show. Yeah. So we'll get him when he's running again.
Maybe we can get Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That'd be awesome.
Great.
That'd be awesome.
Once we get that studio set up, and we can do Skype calls.
She's going to be the youngest
youngest female congresswoman
ever, right?
Yeah.
That's super cool, right?
Yeah.
I can't.
And she was a bartender a year ago.
This
is the point. Anyone can do this if you have the convictions to do it, and you can build a team around you that knows what they're doing. Like in her case, she had the people that really put her on the map were the socialist documentarians who did that viral video that really got her going. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's beautiful. Remember how Bernie had that one ad that was like everyone's like, "Whoa, that's amazing!" It was with Simon and Garfunkel.
Oh, okay.
You remember that one?
Yeah.
It's like that.
Okay.
It was something about like she's like, no one would think that I would run. I'm just a working class woman.
I think I saw a clip of that on a different show.
Yeah.
I think they played a section of it.
See, that's what I'm saying. This is like, it was like, so that's like, usually if you're doing it under a regular campaign, you need like 50 people to put together this commercial that's generic, or in this case, like 2 or 3 people that could put something together that's meaningful and powerful for almost no money because they're passionate.
And the fact that, any of the press that she's getting at this point is basically, free campaign ad anyway. She said she was going to turn that Hannity spot into a campaign ad because it basically is. Because he basically, what I was saying before, he failed in making the "you're a communist" smear stick.
Yeah.
He just sort of didn't do it properly.
And with that being said, even though we're nearing the end of our show, our guest has definitely joined us here today. She was part of Team Chewy, as well as she was endorsed by Our Revolution Illinois. For our viewers and subscribers, I know you just came back from a huge protest that was happening downtown. Can you please introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, my name is Beatriz Frausto-Sandoval. I'm the Democratic nominee for the 14th Judicial Sub-Circuit in Cook County, which means I'll be taking the bench in December.
So, essentially, first, while we still have some time, what was your main reasons for one, running for this judicial seat, and two, I know that you were at the huge protest that was happening downtown. What were your reasons for participating in that protest?
So obviously I'm an attorney, right? I ran for judge. I am an immigration attorney since I graduated in 2005. What we've seen this year, the threats to the Constitution that we've seen, the threats to due process, the dismantling of due process, and like the treatment of immigrants really as like non-people is, I think it's completely unprecedented. These things were already happening from day one of the Trump administration. And it made me realize that being an immigration attorney was no longer enough, that I needed to take more of a decision-making role. As an immigration attorney, I've always felt sort of like the Dutch boy with the finger in the dam. You're fighting in the trenches. You're helping one family at a time. And meanwhile, there's this huge, complex monster of a system that is just, continues to steamroll over people's rights. So although I'm not going to be an immigration judge, and I would quite frankly, that I don't know if I could do that. I don't think my poor heart could take that. My hope is that by being a Cook County judge, that I can use my background, both my background as an immigration attorney and also my background as the daughter of immigrants, as the daughter of people who were discriminated against and went through many struggles of their own, someone who has, I've faced quite a bit of adversity in my life, that I can be a voice for people in Cook County in the court system who haven't had that voice. In our judicial subcircuit, the 14th subcircuit, which comprises the southwest side, there had never before been a Latina elected judge. So we've had a couple of Latino judges, never a Latina since the subcircuits were created in 1992. And keep in mind, those subcircuits were created to reflect our communities. So how is it possible that in all these years, we've never once had a Latina judge, and we've had only, 2 or 3 Latino elected judges out of that subcircuit? So it's time for a change. My hope is that the future judges that are elected in our subcircuit continue to reflect the community. Because I don't want to be the lone wolf.
Exactly, and that's something that we definitely want to see more of. I think, as we've all seen from the primary, though, the one thing that we saw was that there was a low turnout. And as we go into the general election, at least what do you plan on at least contributing for there to be at least a higher turnout, especially amongst young people, millennials, because that's the next large voting block in this country in regards to future election cycles.
Yes. Well, I think that the activity that we're seeing nationwide right now, the election of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in New York.
We're just talking about that.
Things are progressing. The fact that there were so many people out at this rally today, and I might add that it was a really diverse group. It was not just the typical people who come out to the immigration rallies on May 1st every year. So I think that people are really awakening across the country, and it's going to continue. For my own personal experience running for judge, I think that I hope that in my campaign I helped to make people aware of the fact that judges in our local courts have a big influence on our lives, and so we really need to care more and educate ourselves about those choices, because oftentimes it's a foregone conclusion. People run for judge unopposed, and we can afford to be a little more choosy. We can definitely keep an eye on that more.
How much agency do you have when it comes to picking and choosing which cases you want to hear? And can you come into that with kind of priorities about how you want to direct the court?
I think eventually, as you move up in the court, you will have more say in where you're placed. Obviously, initially, everybody starts at the bottom, most likely traffic court. What I'm interested in is being at the court, learning how it works, learning the ways that I can continue to advocate for the community that I've been a part of and the community that I've served as a lawyer within that system, and also bearing witness to how that system is actually working. For example, right now we have court interpreters that are going to be forced to take furlough days. And so I need to be there to bear witness to how that is going to affect our citizens in Cook County who need those services, and how that's going to affect their access to justice. So as a judge, you're limited. You can't take political stances, but at the same time, we're there to uphold justice. So then I think that means that I can bear witness and speak, certainly at radio stations or at, like, educational speaking engagements about how this is playing out, because it's something that I think the general public should be aware of.
And a final note in regards to where our viewers and listening audience, where they can learn more about your campaign and about some issues that you'll be running for. Where can they find you on social media?
Beatriz for Sub-Circuit Judge and BeatrizForJudge.com. That's BeatriZ.
All right. Thank you so much for joining Hardlands Media.
Thank you for having
me. And to our entire viewing audience, our listening audience, you're listening to us on 1680 AM, Q4radio.org. And if you like what we do have a Patreon page. So check it out, harlandsmedia.patreon.com. Your support is the main heart and backbone to everything that we do here. So with that being said, peace to everyone. See you next Saturday, and let's all do what we can to build a better future.